Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy, and I am a representative from EHN Canada. We are a nationwide network of treatment centers for addiction, trauma, and mental health. We have facilities in Nanaimo, British Columbia, Calgary, Alberta, Toronto and Peterborough, Ontario, Montreal, Quebec, and Annapolis County, Nova Scotia. We offer high-quality inpatient, outpatient, and online treatment programs. For more information, please visit our website at ehncanada.com. Just a few housekeeping items. Everyone is on mute and cameras are off for today's webinar, but please feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions for our speaker. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we will be sending out a follow-up email next week that will include the link to the video recording, the slides of today's presentation, and any other useful resources mentioned today. And of course, your CEU certificate. We appreciate your patience. Today's webinar topic is spirituality and recovery. I will now introduce today's speaker, Colette Currin. Colette is a counselor working with those affected by mental health and addiction disorders, whether inpatient, outpatient, in-person, or online, either individually or in groups. Her enthusiasm for the recovery process is centered in her own personal journey over the past 27 years in sobriety. Colette also serves as the National Director of Business Development for military, veterans, and first responders, where the calling to serve others can sometimes injure the self. Family units, no matter how diverse and beautiful, bear the brunt of any individual disorder. They also offer the most transformative potential to alchemize pain into collective growth, providing a healing power that is far greater than the sum of its parts. Please help me welcome today's presenter, Colette.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, and hi, everyone. It's so exciting watching the participants come online from Amherstburg. Like, I find I want to look up places where you all are, and from all the way from Victoria to Newfoundland. So lovely to have us together as a community today to talk about, I think, a difficult subject to present, and nevertheless one that is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm going to weigh in and we're going to talk a little bit about spirituality, what that is, and of course, the reason that I believe, and in good evidence-based practice, we believe that it is important in terms of helping people in recovery, and how we came to believe so by looking at a spiritual program that is designed to help us to bring about a kind of awakening to our own spirituality. All right, so without further ado, let me jump in, see if I can find my slides here, and there we go. All right, so when we talk about spirituality, I find, and often when I'm presenting in our inpatient settings with clients, that it's almost necessary to begin with the debate around what is the difference between spirituality and religion. Like, Colette, are you going to come at me with all that God stuff because I want nothing to do with it? I'm an atheist, da 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 da. And I think, religion can certainly have spirituality inherent in it. And yet spirituality to me is something very different to that, and perhaps broader than that, in that religion brings to us tenets and texts and meeting places and shared beliefs that are quite structured. And there can be different religions that can be quite different from each other. Spirituality is more to do with our, call it Viktor Frankl's man's search for meaning, if you like. But it is the idea of trying to connect with my sense of purpose and what's important to me. And it's, in fact, my connection also to things bigger than that. How am I connected in this time that I have on this 5 minutes on the stage to others and to the world around me. And I think it's this struggle to understand that. So when we talk about spirituality, the first thing, we first going to look at spirituality, and then we're going to kind of look at how we try to bring that into recovery, and in particular recovery from mental health, addiction, trauma. The first thing to understand is the predicament, which is the mind. I have a mind, as perhaps you do too, that is constantly narrating the world around me. And it is looking out for problems that might distress or offend or endanger me in some way. When we look at, if we hurt ourselves physically, that's going to present as pain. And if we're struggling with not doing okay psychologically, that will present as fear. So I feel propelled by the sense of disquiet. My psyche is not feeling okay. There's a sense of fear. And then I put the mind on the job. And I say, hey, can you get out there? And can you control things for me? Fix things out there so that I feel okay in here. And this is the first thing to understand, is that this predicament is misguided because it really isn't addressing the root cause of what's going on, with that I'm not feeling whole, I'm not feeling complete. So the first thing that we need to do when we want to get in touch with this idea of spirituality is that we need to free the mind, or fire the mind, and to make a fundamental switch from understanding that when I have what we refer to as these kind of blockages in energy or chi or shakti or spirit, whatever you want to call it, it's because I have these samskaras, I have these wounds, these thorns, if you like, and I am closing in around them because I'm trying to protect myself from getting hurt. So that might either be by, sort of forces that are resisting what is going on in the world, because if that, happens, that's going to hurt me, or clinging on to things that I believe need to happen or need to be, fear of losing certain things, because that then in some sense is going to endanger me. So I'm essentially closing in around whatever it is that blockage, that thorn, that dis-ease, that unrest that is causing the need for me to do so. So, all right. So now there's a fundamental thing that needs to happen, is I need to recognize I'm putting mind to work to try and control the whole world out there. And instead, I want to make a fundamental shift in focus to understanding what is going on in here. And I need, therefore, as I do this work of remembering who I am, taking a higher seat of consciousness, I begin the process of, instead of trying to entangle using mind with these hurts and fears, is that I observe. Sounds really passive, doesn't it? Is that I simply observe what it is that is occurring inside of me. Now, that might sound easy, but this ability to just create the sacred pause between the things that are pulling, and they usually have tremendous magnetic force, right? In fact, Eckhart Tolle talks about, the pain body is that we surmise it to be this dangerous monster that we can barely bear to take a look at, and that, in fact, it is an insubstantial phantom against the power of our presence. So we're trying to introduce this idea of, can I just sit in a higher seat of consciousness and observe what it is that arises? When I sit and I create enough quiet, I need to be quiet. Mind is not going to be quiet. I need to be quiet. And I observe what is coming up. Often people think when they're sitting in trying to do meditation practice that, oh, well, I don't know how to do that. It doesn't work for me. Because, hi, Swan, I see you jumping on. Just checking my audio's okay. Yeah. As I sit in meditation, I thought that my mind was supposed to be quiet if I'm really brilliant at this. And really, frankly, I'm just practicing the ability to observe mind and to know that I am not mind. to observe feelings and know that I'm not feelings. I see what comes up for me, and my job is to just don't touch, don't entangle, right? And that is how I resolve what comes up, is actually by doing nothing. Like, it sounds crazy, doesn't it? Like, the worst thing that you can do to this stuff is simply to watch it, right? To watch it and to understand that by observing it and by disentangling from it, by knowing that I am not it, this is how it will resolve itself in the present moment. Okay, so when we understand, therefore, that the going beyond mind is really what we're talking about when we talk about the essence of spirituality, and that is not to ignore what comes up or to minimize it in any way, because we need to understand what those hurts are that we have decided to build a cage around, right? They have influenced so much of our conditioning, our thoughts lead to feelings, lead to behaviors. And so it's really important to understand the cage that we built around something. And it's also important when we notice that we want to close again, when we observe what is happening and that we want to protect, like that tendency, what that mind says is like, have you got me on the job? What do I do to defend against resisting, clinging in order to keep you safe? That I need to ask mine to step aside, and then I need to allow this stuff to arise, and I need to leave it alone. I need to realize that the business of letting it go, right, is I don't protect that stuff. I allow it to dissolve. I allow myself to let it go by the act of not entangling with it, right? So we often hear when we talk about spiritual practice about this reference to the ancient art of alchemy. In fact, Jung talked a lot about this process of alchemizing this material. I mean, it's great, right? We've got a lot to work with. When, like, sometimes we see that pain and we're like, oh, not again, or not this, not now, not me. And when that stuff arises, it is literally the fuel for the journey, because it provides me with the material that I can delve into and that I can transmute. So this process of transmutation is to alchemize the raw metal into gold, right? As I turn that pain into insight and growth and awareness. So it's actually this process of transformation, this remembering who I am, and this accessing a power of knowing that, of being connected to that, which goes so much beyond mind, is the role of spirituality, connectedness to self, connectedness to something bigger than my limited idea of what self actually is. And so let's take, I want to move on, obviously, to taking a look at its role in recovery. But the other thing I just wanted to mention, I'm such a fan of Kristen Neff, and she's got some great books and podcasts and so on out on self-compassion. Because, when we talk about this work, I know it sounds difficult, like, Colette, you're asking me to do nothing. You're asking me to not engage mind, this wonderful tool. And of course, we respect mind and we know how to work with that. In fact, mind is like a computer, right? It's been programmed, but it's often been programmed with a lot of irrational thoughts. And we need to understand that too. And also sometimes it's trying to do the job that it should not be tasked with, because mind can be used to solve scientific problems, to serve humanity, and do wonderful things. But it's about me knowing when do I use that as a tool, right? And so this change in perception and this ability to do the work of allowing myself to develop clarity around what comes up for me and recognizing the fears. There's this evolutionary like negativity bias that we have, right? Which is important. It's not important for me to be positive about everything. It's important for me to know where danger might look. And so there is this negativity bias that we have in us. And yet I need to do the mindful work of allowing myself to see what that is. And Kristen goes on to say that we don't do the mindfulness work without kindness. We refer to that the two-winged bird, right, of compassion, is that I can see how I feel. I can see what happened. I can see how I'm responding. I can see how I hurt around that thing. And I can desire for that to be different. So the mindfulness is like really the focus on the experience itself and allowing it to be, like, obviously, right? To disallow that is really insanity, because reality is whatever is. And so I need to accept whatever is, and accept that experience. And I can feel compassion for the experiencer, right? The me that has experienced that, the me that has suffered as a result of that, and my desire for that to be something different. And to round that out, we talk about connectedness to community is understanding that I'm not the only one who feels this way. I'm not the only one who deals with pain and hurt. And the power of that connectedness, like to common humanity, is hard to describe. And it actually makes me feel emotional, as people can probably hear, because when we do go through pain and we go through tough times, others that have experienced that in some way are able to say, we understand how that feels, and so when I realize that what I experience is something bigger than me, that this self that is experiencing this is connected to others and connected to their selves, is my concept of self kind of expands as a result of that. You are no longer alone, and that other people can support me through those experiences. So this work, and when we go on to look at when we're dealing with addiction, is really boosted by community and connectedness to others who understand. Okay, so let's take a look now at substance-related and addictive disorders in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, version number 5. Substance use disorders are essentially defined as a behavior that I can't stop that is causing problems. So ordinarily, if I have a behavior that I'm engaged in that is causing problems for me, easy, stop doing it, right? And yet, despite the fact that it's causing problems, I seem unable to discontinue the behavior that is causing harm. And when we look at all the, and the other thing defining substance use disorder or addiction is that I develop tolerance and withdrawal, right? So I start to lean into substances that have the potentiality for abuse. So I might be smoking weed. The tetrahydrocannabinoid is able to mimic my natural cannabinoid receptors in the brain, that they can therefore lock in to the receptors in the central nervous system. And instead, I'm going to smoke weed and I'm going to bump those out of the way, and I'm going to do the job. I'm going to really do the job. I'm going to boost that impact as much as I can. At the end of the day, we're all dopamine junkies, right? We use different drugs and substances to come at behaviors, to come at that in different ways, but essentially we're trying to boost as much dopamine into the central nervous system as possible. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation, expectation. I'm trying to get that high. And so I continue behaving in behaviors that initially present me with this feeling of euphoria and pain relief. for a lot of people. So I get the double whammy, right? I get to feel good, and I get, for two reasons, I get the euphoria of these substances, and I get the relief of some of the concurrent underlying conditions. And so I go marching inexorably along the continuum from use to misuse to abuse, dependence, and eventually addiction, where I now have lost the power of choice over these substances that have really had the potentiality to mess with my brain. Okay, so when we look at this disorder, we got these guys who decided in consultation with none other, by the way, than the great Carl Jung, that spirituality and a kind of a spiritual solution would play an important role in alleviating us from this condition. So that sounds a little like, when we're working in a treatment center that has evidence-based practice and trained clinicians that will deal with these conditions and so on. This seems a little bit out there. It's like, evidence-based practice trying to weigh itself up against practice-based evidence of the spiritual approach. So let's take a closer look at that. In 1935, the Association Alcoholics Anonymous was born because, long story short, you had this guy Roland who lived in New York City, and he was battling, with this condition. Family's got lots of money. He goes over to be treated by none other than the great Carl Jung, our founder of modern psychology, along with some of the other greats. And, Jung's good at his job, very successful. Roland is abstinent. He's in recovery, goes back to New York, and he relapses. And so he gets back on the plane, lots of money in the family, back to Carl Jung. And, Jung sits down with him and he says, I don't know that I have what you need. I don't know that I can cut this. Roland is somewhat alarmed because this is, you would imagine the best of the best that he's come to for treatment. And he says, well, are there like Jung is saying to him, I've rarely seen people that have this disorder to the extent that you do be able to sustain ongoing recovery in their lives. And Roland says, well, are there no exceptions to that? And Jung says, yeah. Since ancient times, we have seen people that have this condition that have something that's in the nature of a spiritual awakening, really be able to keep this thing going. And Roland says, well, that's good news. Thank goodness for that. Thank God for that. Like, I'm a religious man. I go to church and blah, blah, blah. And Jung says to him, it's not quite the same thing. What Jung was referring to when he talked about this spiritual awakening, and of course there were letters exchanged between Jung and Bill W. Bill W. Being one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, authored the 12 Steps. And they were trying to get a sense of, look, what exactly is this thing then? What do you mean by this spiritual awakening? And what Jung was referring to is the idea that we need to have a fundamental shift in our beliefs and values, our sense of purpose and meaning. And that without that actually taking place, if we are merely just treating the condition, the solution to our problems really, then we really aren't going to be able to be propelled forward. It's going to make it a lot more difficult, at least, in an ongoing manner, to kind of the stick-to-itness of this idea of abstinence and sobriety and coming out from under this condition, that it would really require something much more fundamental to be taking place. And so, of course, Bill is the guy. Roland hears this message from Jung. He goes on to talk to Ebby. Ebby's the guy who sits at the kitchen table with Bill, and he tries to describe this experience that he's had, or this awakening of sorts. of course, we need to recognize that initially when the 12 steps were authored, there was a lot of kind of religious overtones in that because it was informed by the Oxford group and so on. So let's not deny that, because I think when a lot of people come to the wisdom in the 12-step tradition, they need to kind of get past a lot of the, gender insensitive, trauma triggering, archaic language in the Queen's English to find the beautiful 12 pearls of spiritual wisdom that are embedded in them, right? And so Bill, trying to sustain his own recovery, and he's in Akron, Ohio, and he's in a hotel. He's down there on a conference or something, and he can hear. He's in the lobby of the hotel, and he just, that thing that they write in the big book where they go, and there will come a time when there's nothing standing between you and the drink. Not there might come a time. There will come a time. And so what is it that we will need then? And he's feeling pretty desperate, and he really doesn't want to drink, and he picks up the phone and he says, look, I need to talk to somebody else that suffers from this condition. Anybody? Have you got anybody in town? And of course he gets connected to Dr. Bob. And so they begin the business of trying to figure out this condition and a remedy, which they believe is based on this idea that we talked about spirituality or spiritual awakening, spiritual awareness. So I just want to watch my time here. So the first step, they say, is Dr. Bob is a medical guy, right? He's a doctor. He's a man of science. He says we have to start with the diagnosis of the problem. So step one is saying the diagnosis is that there is a lack of power. So we need to understand why there is a lack of power. And it is defined as two-part, in that I have an allergy of the body. I battled with this word allergy. What does allergy mean? It's like allergy means I have an unusual reaction to an everyday substance, right? So when I put these substances in my body, I develop a craving beyond all comprehension, beyond my comprehension, certainly beyond my family or my friends' comprehension, beyond anybody's comprehension that doesn't have this condition. Now, this, again, he's a man of science. This doesn't ignore why that happens. Of course, there's all these biopsychosocial reasons, like I might be genetically, the ACE, American Society of Addiction Medicine, says genetics account for up to 50% of our vulnerability. My neurochemical response, my dopamine reward that I have from certain substances, was I lacking in dopamine in the first place? Like, there is research, going on all over the place about what might be going on physically with me. Biological conditions, psychological conditions, like, do I have certain personality traits? What about all the learning and conditioning that has made it so? Humanistic theories will say, I would naturally self-actualize, but there's a lot of barriers, maybe poverty or my self-esteem, identity needs, and so on, standing in the way of that. Psychodynamic theories, Freud is going to say it could be early childhood development and, stuff that happened there, that we may need to go take a look at, that which you most need will be found where you least want to look, right? So the point is that when I put substances in my body, I have a compulsion to use more. You stop at one or two, and I'm getting ready to go, right? And so, like, in my own case, and as Jeremy was sharing, I'm 28 years in recovery from drinking alcohol, and on this journey of sobriety and what that means. For me, it wasn't that I drank too much. It was that I couldn't drink enough. Right. So hence that idea of one is too many because 1,000 is not enough. So this phenomenon of craving kicks in, fueled by whatever biopsychosocial reasons have come together in me to create the perfect storm to make it so. And the other part of that problem is this obsession of the mind, which says next time it'll be different. I think I can control this. I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to drink wine. And so on. So again, when we look at the definition of addiction, it's this idea of if this behavior is causing problems, or I know that when I drink, I just don't stop and I keep going, then don't do it, right? And so the definition of the problem that I'm belaboring here is really important, because if my problem was really that I drink too much, then the solution is, well, drink less, right? But the problem is not that. The problem is deeper than that. The problem is that despite the fact that I have this reaction to something that is beginning to cause me harm and continuing to cause me harm and causing me more and more harm, my mind just won't buy it. You know, my mind, therefore, is very much a part of the problem. Okay. And this definition of the problem is really important, because the solution, the definition of the solution, is based on the definition of the problem, which is, if I therefore am experiencing powerlessness and unmanageability, right, is I have a body that can't tolerate what my mind won't leave alone. And this is making the situation powerless and unmanageable. Then by the very nature of the definition of that problem, the power has to come from somewhere else. So that's a big shift in understanding, right? Came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. So, I mean, this definition of the self, what is the self, is why I say the prescription of the solution is self-realization. You know, it's proposing a spiritual power, and this idea of spirituality, I know, is difficult for us to get our heads around and to contend with, because it's very difficult to define. And yet, through self-realization, am I at least able to see that in order to restore myself to sanity or to sane thinking, I can't fix my mind with my mind. I'm going to need something bigger than the mind. And therefore, the idea that I engage in the process of being able to recognize that I am not my mind, and to recognize what the tasks of the mind are. Brilliant. Let's use them to remember how to drive a car, go do my PhD, all that kind of thing. That's great. But let's not use them to be solving these problems. So I have to take a higher seat of consciousness. I have to drop from operating system number one, which is my mind, and all its learning and conditioning, to operating system number two, the part of me that is able to distance from mind and observe mind. And then we go on to say, in step three, is, can I make the decision to surrender to that power? Wow. Right? I don't even really understand how that power works at this point in the journey of recovery, and I'm being asked to surrender to it. The problem is that over-reliance on mind, on this idea, this self-constructed, humanly limited idea of self, an over-reliance on that is the very thing that will block me from the solution. So, as long as I'm not prepared to surrender to something that I may not yet quite understand, you know, that it's got this complicated thing to it, where I literally sit back into my true power, my true sense of being, and I operate from that place instead of from this place, is what is going to be required to enable me to have a spiritual awakening, right? By the time we get to step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of doing these steps. So there's a leap of faith required, like, for sure, right? And the willingness, like, how do I do that? As we saw earlier when we were talking about spirituality, is the willingness that I can surrender the mind to something bigger than itself. I can sit and observe, and I can allow whatever comes up to be resolved in the present. Not only can it not be resolved with my mind, I can't touch it either. I just allow myself to observe and to let go, to know that's not who I am. Mind mustn't touch it. And as I sit and I watch. I don't touch, don't entangle. And I allow this to resolve itself in the present moment, right? So in the third step of this approach that Bill and Bob are trying to cobble together, they recognize why we can't use our own powers. They recognize that if we can tap into our true power and potential in the universe, that's going to be the solution. And are we prepared to surrender mind to that knowing? All right. If that's true, then really the following steps 4 to 9, are about saying, you got the answers, it's all going to be resolved. And so really what you have to do now is just to unblock yourself. Steps 4 to 9 are just about blocking the barrier, removing the barriers that are blocking you from the true power of the spirit within you. Right? And do you see why this is really helpful to understand for people that don't have to believe in a religious sense of a God, right? This atheistic God is out there, is external to me. Sometimes when I'm trying to describe this stuff, it's like I go, I am God, which, often makes people laugh, but it's like, I am that power inside of me. So are you. So is it everywhere. It's our decision to grasp onto the trolley strap, as Wayne Dyer would say, to plug into that power, to surrender to that power because it's there. And yet that's hard to do because there's a lot of things that block me from doing that. And so in this 12-step wisdom tradition, it's saying, we got a couple of suggestions here, by the way. We've kind of worked on this and we've taken a look at it, and we have some suggestions about things that may help to remove those barriers. And that's why they're really the therapeutic modalities that we deal with are all buried in the steps, and they're all inherent in the steps anyway, because it's saying I need to look at all those things that are resisting and clinging, those magnetic pull forces, the thorns, right, inside of me that I'm trying to protect. And I need to lay them on the table. I need to say, what are those things? And I need to understand, what's the remorse, regret, resentment from the past, the fear and anxiety about the future that is blocking me from being present now, right? I mean, we need more time if we want to talk about Eckhart Tolle's concept of the power of now, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be okay in now, because if I'm okay in now, and I'm okay in now, and I'm okay in now, it's always now, right? Then I'm okay. So I'm removing whatever robs me of my ability to just be present now, right? Everything happens in the now. Like the future is going to happen in the now, right? So what is it that is blocking me from my ability to do that? I make a list of those things. I look at what my part is in those things. I have no control over other people, right? The beautiful wisdom of the 12-step prayer and the courage to change the only one person that I can, right? And the serenity to accept all the things. Stop trying to control the world out there and start to understand things in here. Right. And so those are the things that I have any part of control over, that I can actually, some of those I can apply my mind to, put it to a task. Let's use that beautiful tool for some good thinking. And I work with somebody else, right, to do that, because my mind is a little unreliable and unpredictable and full of blind spots and irrational thought patterns. I also facilitate smart recovery groups where I'm always asking people to catch, check, and challenge their thinking, right? Based on rational emotive behavior therapy. Our thoughts are going to affect our feelings, will affect our behaviors. So by all means, let's clean up the software in that computer and let's look at those irrational thought patterns. I need somebody else to help me weigh in on that, though, because again, I can't fix my mind with my mind. I can't be the physician and the patient at times. And so somebody else is also kind of clued into this idea of this power available to us, this kind of I'm tapping in that as I do this work, and I know that those thoughts aren't mine, and I'm trying to figure out the business of letting go. I allow those principles to guide me, and I work together with somebody else to augment that process, right? Then I get to step 6 and 7. Man, that's where the gold is. That's like, I realize that not only did I call on this power that I can't understand, but it's bigger than me, or this me that I believe that I am, to help me to relinquish the destructive behavior that I was engaged in, the solution that became my problem, my addiction. I now need to do the same thing when it comes to resolving my defects of character. Once again, I can't have mind jump in again, try to take control again, and try to do the rewiring of me again. I'm a huge Zen student, I guess, and so the idea that I'm fine, true self is perfect, arrives perfect, and we have had a lot of learning and conditioning that has told it perhaps that that's not so. Maybe you're a worthless whatever, people aren't to be trusted. The world's not a safe place. When I work with the military and veterans, we look at PTSD and stuck points, like these become fundamental, forged like wire core beliefs, right? So we have to do cognitive processing therapy, not cognitive behavior therapy, to look at these beliefs and to resolve those. So I recognize once again that a lot of what's going on in the mind is faulty thinking, and therefore I'm trying to address situations with this faulty thinking. And so can I at least recognize that? And can I believe that humbly asked, the way that it's phrased in the 12 steps, humbly asked him, or this power, to remove our shortcomings? That is to say, can I trust that this same power, when I sit in that seat of power, my true self, my higher consciousness, not my conditioned mind self, that this is how it will be resolved? That I can't be trying to do it from here. And once I know this, I become aware of these character defects. I eliminate the barriers that are preventing me to living according to the values and the principles that I hold dear, and to choose to be guided by those. Then there's some reality therapy thrown in there. It's like, well, then go out and put your money where your mouth is. Go out and make amends, right? Not to, at others' expense, right, is in order for you to help with the process of letting go. We do have assignments here now that we can list and do and engage in, whereby we can, the things that make you feel really crappy about yourself is to amend, is to change, is to live my intention of being different. To that, and the things that guided me, perhaps greed or avarice or pride taken too far. Strengths, I'm a massive fan of strengths in recovery. Like, man, let's now discover our strengths, right? Like in the corporate world, we do those personality injury, strength finder, Myers-Briggs. I need to know what my strengths are, because I believe my strengths will be some of the most important tools in my recovery. I also learned that addiction often took my strengths and usurped them in its own endeavors, right? And so now I will use my strengths and I will point them toward good purpose. I now am able to aim them at the things that bring me joy, basically through living this way. Instead of chasing happiness, I now get to experience joy. Okay, so I got to move along because I know I'm going to start running out of time. So this is a whole bunch of suggestions right there that are going to help to unblock you to be able to enjoy the experience of this spiritual power. And it's not a once and done deal, right? It's that the steps 10 to 12 are the maintenance steps, like just much like gardening. It looks like this guy's trying to take a selfie, actually, not that he's doing gardening. When I do gardening, I need to recognize that the weeds will return, right? And I need to get at those, and I need to be aware of them, and I need to pull those out, and I want to plant the things that bring me joy. And so it's a constant game of maintenance, right? So I sit there and I do a daily inventory. I have the ability to see, I used to do this with my son when he was little. We'd sit at dinner and we'd say, what are highs and lows and what did you do that was kind, right? So, or as we say in Smart Recovery, what was a success? What was a challenge, right? What did I do that was kind was thrown in there for good measure. Because if I decide I want my life to be guided by the value of loving kindness, as Buddha said, what is your religion? Loving kindness. Then can I try to do that? Can I act as if? Can I just once a day send an email to a friend, thinking of you, hope you're doing well, blah, blah, blah. Just throw it in just once in the day, because, it's important. I say it's important, so can I live according to that? And I need to sit in prayer and meditation. For me, prayer is to walk on the Bruce Trail, right? Like nature is my cathedral. It's where I experience my sense of connectedness. Just thinking about it, to something bigger than myself. And so we need to remember that practice. Like you don't, it's like saying I now know how to do sit-ups, so I'm not going to do them every day, and then I'll still be fit. Like I mindfulness, like I just beg clients I just say, look, because I'm not great at meditating by myself, I usually have to go sit like a little chicken in a coop, where the rising tide floats all boats, and meditate with others. And I've had to learn that I'm not doing it as daily practice, if that's strictly the case. So can I just set my alarm for 10 minutes earlier, and when it goes off, hit the snooze button and just notice my breath, just use my breath to anchor myself in the present moment, so that thoughts drag me away back to breath, just using my breath to ground myself in the present, so that when the time comes, not if, that my mind may say to me, I'm really going through so much pain right now that anybody in this situation would relapse. Or you've been sober for a long time, Colette, like, might be a good idea to enjoy other substances, or to, that I can watch and figure out what that's about. Like some people might even act on that, right? The trans-theoretical model of change says if something like that happens, you haven't lost your recovery, you're still on your journey. What can you learn from that to integrate and keep going? And then in step 12, having started to awaken to all of this and figuring out how it works, I try to go out and I try to pass this message on to others in the hopes that it may help them with their recovery and to try and understand these slippery concepts a little better. Like last thing I want to say, as I try to wrap this up, is so what am I saying here? Like, should we stop with all the therapeutic modalities? Like, why do we need all these trained professionals and clinicians? Why am I doing CBT and DBT and CPT and progressive exposures and all this stuff all day long if really I need to resort to spiritual wisdom? Again, I think I hope that I've imparted that the therapeutic modalities are buried within the 12 steps in those beautiful pearls of wisdom that help us to open up to this idea, this understanding of how we might want to live our life and choose to be guided by our values instead of blocked from them. The thoughts came to believe, creates, where did I have this? I had this written down because I knew I'd never forget all this. Step 2, thoughts, create the words. In step 3, I'm going to make a decision. And steps 4 to 9, I'm going to take the action. Action then becomes the practice. Practice creates the character, right? And I think that we need both. And that's why I will teach CBT. I will help you to check, challenge your thinking. We'll regulate emotions. We'll do all that stuff. And we need to look at the value of really incorporating this idea of spirituality in our recovery. And nobody can say it best than Gabor Mate. So I actually wanted to read out this quote. Let me just move this. My face is in the way here. Spiritual work and psychological work are both necessary to reclaim our true nature. Without psychological strength, spiritual practice can easily become another addictive distraction from reality. Conversely, shorn of a spiritual perspective, we are prone to stay stuck in the limited realm of the grasping ego, even if it's a healthier and more balanced ego. our soul needs for meaning and connection remain unsatisfied. Therapy strives to make the deficient self stronger by uncovering the sources of a person's emotional pain and releasing the rigid defensive patterns built against it. Spiritual exploration plows the same ground, but is less concerned with fixing or improving things than the rediscovering what is whole and has not been absent, just obscured. So beautifully put. Thank you, Gabor. So I guess that we need to remember as we do the work in recovery or just on ourselves, when we're hurting or looking for a sense of meaning and purpose, that which you are looking for is that which is looking. It's all already inside of you. And our business is to allow it to reveal itself. Okay, I think I have come, therefore, to the end of my slideshow. And here's where I hand back to the wonderful Jeremy to see if we have some time to answer questions.
Yes, of course we have time. Thank you so much, Colette. That was amazing as per usual. And I'm going to echo what everyone's been saying in the comment section, that your voice is so soothing and you're such a easygoing presenter, and it's so encapsulating. So thank you again for experiencing your knowledge with us.
Thank you.
So to get to some questions, can you provide an example of a cause that one may be creating a cage around that could be interfering with one connecting to spirituality?
A cause that one builds a cage around?
Correct.
Right. Well, I think that these wounds, these pain bodies, as Eckhart Tolle refers to them, are they're accumulated experiences that we've had in our past. And we also have learned, if we read a lot of Gabor Mate's work, and I believe it to be true, that trauma also can be inherited across generations, right? So sometimes that trauma is passed along in us. And it's a tricky business, understanding that genetics tests being done on rats will show that, like, the grandchildren of those rats will have responses of fear to certain sounds or things that happen which they've never been exposed to before, simply because that's been passed along. And understanding that play of genetics is not simple, because it's epigenetics always, right? The epigenome that sits on top of each gene, like a piano key, deciding if that will play. So always the nature-nurture environment. So some of it, we come into the world with these kind of predispositions, and a lot of it is learning and conditioning. And that's why I think for those of us that suffer from a substance use disorder, addictive behavior, that we are trying very hard to deal with those maladaptive conditions. I always declare I'm a card-carrying member of the CIA, long line of Catholic Irish alcoholics. And so perhaps the families that we were born into have suffered from addiction themselves, and they didn't know how to be great parents, right? And perhaps they were even really abusive, and so on. And so these things are very unique to any single one of us. So it could be, the abusive childhood that you suffered. We look at ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences, and you can look at that and just see, did I suffer from any of these emotional abuse, physical abuse, abandonment, incarceration of a parent, like whatever they may be. And it hurts. And then we want to, our natural inclination, this negativity bias, is to try to protect ourselves, to literally build a cage around that hurt, that thorn. And it's saying, okay, hang on a second, don't do that. Whatever you do, do not close around it. You have to stay open. It's really hard and scary, and it feels counterintuitive to what you're doing, but you literally have to open up. And that cage around the hurt, you have to learn why you built it. Right. And that's why when we sit in that awareness, we see, when we do that, we see, when you stop drinking, you're going to come up against the causes that made you drink pretty quickly. Right. And we allow those causes to present themselves, and we don't touch. We just simply watch, and they will present themselves to us layer by layer by layer by layer. And our job simply is to let go. So whatever that hurt is I cannot tell that person what it is, because it's whatever hurt you that way and caused you to need to protect it somehow, in the beliefs that that would be the best thing to do. I'll put a cage around it, and then my thorn, and then I'll try and stop the whole world from bumping my thorn. Or how about I get rid of the thorn?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So there was reference earlier in your presentation about us all being dopamine junkies. Could you please elaborate how this is?
Sure. So when we engage in different substances, like I may take stimulants, hallucinogens, depressants, etc., they all act on different neurotransmitter systems, but ultimately we are going to affect the reward pathway in the primal brain. And so the way I get there, it's all roads lead to Rome. The way that I get there is kind of irrelevant, right? I may look at you and go, why are you addicted to cocaine? I don't like the way that it makes me feel. It makes me feel jittery and, horrible. And so I'm not necessarily getting a big dopamine reward from that. That's not how I'm managing to spike my dopamine, if you like, right? And so for me, it might be alcohol or, a different kind of depressant and so on. Depressant as in the effect that it has on the central nervous system. And how those neurotransmitters work. So all of them will work differently to try to leave as much dopamine in the synaptic gap, right? I've got the sending neuron, the receiving neuron, and in each synapse, I'm trying to flood that with as much dopamine as possible. That's what I mean by we're dopamine junkies. So different drugs may say, I'm going to prevent reuptake into the sending neuron. I'm going to create stickiness to the receiving neuron. I'm going to get rid of the enzymes that will dissolve any of this dopamine. Like I just leave as much dopamine as you can, right? And we need to think of the brain as like a thermostat. Like this thing is a finely calibrated instrument, so it's trying its best to maintain homeostasis. And so when it sees this much dopamine coming in, it's going like, geez, man, like overload. And so it starts to fight back. It starts to shut down some of the receptors on the receiving neurons and bring in transporters to try and clear away some of that dopamine. It's like trying to bring the system back into check. That's called tolerance, right? I take the same amount, I'm now getting a diminished effect because the brain is trying its best to recalibrate the amount of dopamine that's in there. And that's why when I stop using as well, I go into withdrawal, because the brain's going, not only have I been shutting the factories down on how much dopamine I'm making, you're the guy who was trucking it in. So where is it? It's going to take some time for us to bring our natural dopamine supply back online. It's quite some time sometimes, right? We look at post-acute withdrawal syndrome. It could be 18 months before you start to feel a sense of pleasure at just normal, how beautiful the fall leaves of today, or, whatever that may be. So that reward pathway in the brain has been severely affected. People say, how long? When I've messed around with the dopamine, I can't answer that. It depends what you were using, how much, how long. It depends on your own physiology. But that's what we're dealing with when we are trying. And that's why, by the way, pharmacological interventions are key. Like if somebody says, I need to go on to an antidepressant, like sometimes people go to AA meetings and, they're like, oh, you're on drugs or antidepressants, you're on methadone or Suboxone, you're on an opioid replacement therapy, or, you're on Valium, pill form of alcohol to bring you off the alcohol. Do not let them have an opinion about it. If they're telling you that's wrong, just walk away. They could kill you. You need to be in the hands of pharmacological experts that are going to help you with that withdrawal process.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Colette. Unfortunately, that is our time. So we appreciate everything that you had to present today, Colette. And again, as always, it was a pleasure. And we hope to see you at future webinars. So thank you so much again, Colette.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Of course. And for everyone attending today, thank you so much again for your attendance. And we will be sending out a follow-up email within the week with a copy of today's recording. the presentation slides, any additional resources, as well as your CEU certificate. In terms of upcoming events, on December 2nd, we are having a webinar, Seeking Treatment for a Loved One, How to Navigate the Conversation with Lynn McLaughlin. She will discuss how to obviously seek out treatment and different programming for a loved one, and how to have that kind of sensitive or controversial topic in conversation. And then on December 16th, we will be hosting Fierce and Sober, EHN Canada's drag holiday extravaganza, where we will be interviewing a panel of drag artists from all around Canada, and they will discuss their recovery and sobriety journey. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you at future webinars.